A man walks into a bank in Tokyo carrying no weapon at all. He is polite. He is calm. He is wearing a white armband on his left arm, the kind an official wears, and he has a business card that says he is a doctor. He tells the staff there has been an outbreak of disease nearby and that the occupation forces are coming to disinfect the building, and that everyone must take a preventative medicine first. 16 people drink what he gives them. 12 of them die. And then he does something that has never been fully explained. He takes about 160,000 yen from the drawers, and he leaves roughly twice that amount sitting where it is. He walks out with less than a third of the money in the building. 8 months later, police arrest a painter. He confesses. He takes it back. He's sentenced to death, and then he lives on death row for 32 years, because not a single justice minister in 3 decades will sign the paper that kills him. He dies in a prison hospital at 95, still saying he did not do it. This is Japan's most famous poisoning and its most uncomfortable conviction. But the question that decides everything is not about the painter at all. It is about a liquid and about what it was called before anyone had a suspect compared to what it was called afterwards. To understand why 16 people drank, you have to understand the winter they were living in. Tokyo in January 1948 is a city 2.5 years out of a lost war. Much of it has burned. People are hungry in a way that is difficult to describe now. The official ration does not keep an adult alive, and everyone survives partly on the black market. And the country is not being governed by itself. It is under occupation, run day to day by an American headquarters that can requisition a building, close a newspaper, or order a neighborhood disinfected. That last detail matters more than anything else in this story. Disease is everywhere. Dysentery, typhus, cholera move through the wards, and the public health response is exactly the kind the man described. An official arrives, and everyone does what they are told. Nobody in that branch had the luxury of skepticism. A man with an armband says the occupation is coming and you must take this first, and in the Tokyo of that winter, that sentence is not strange. It is Tuesday. There is a second thing under the surface of 1948, and the public does not know it yet. The war Japan had just lost included a secret war. There were army laboratories, one in Kawasaki on the edge of Tokyo, and units on the Asian continent whose work was poison, disease, and assassination. Human beings had been used as test subjects. In the summer of 1947, the United States had made a decision about the men who ran that program. Their data was worth more than their prosecution. Immunity, in exchange for what they knew, kept quiet. So on the 26th of January 1948, in the same city, 2 things are true at once. A population trained to obey a health official, and a few hundred men recently demobilized who know exactly how to kill 16 people with a bottle and a pipette. The bank is the Teikoku Bank, the Imperial Bank, and Japan will come to know this by the contraction of its name and its branch, Teigin. The branch is Shinamachi in Nagasaki, in Toshima Ward, a small office in the north of Tokyo, not the city of Nagasaki in the south. It has just closed for the day. 16 people are inside, the staff and the caretaker's family, including a child. The man produces his card and gives his instructions. He has brought a bottle and a komagome pipette, a glass dropper any medical office of the period would have. He measures a first liquid into 16 teacups. Then he tells them how to drink it, and the instruction is oddly specific. The medicine will damage tooth enamel, so put your tongue out and swallow it past your teeth, quickly, all at the same time. Then he does the thing that removes the last doubt in the room. He drinks a dose himself, in front of them, first. They copy him exactly. Several of them will later describe the same sensation, a burning in the chest, like drinking strong whiskey on an empty stomach. The man watches, waits, and after about a minute, he pours a second liquid and tells them to drink that too. Then, people begin to fall. It takes somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes, not the instant collapse of the poison everyone assumes this was. Minutes. Long enough for some of them to stand up. Long enough for one woman to reach the tap. 12 of the 16 die. 4 live, and it is those 4 who will carry this case for the rest of their lives. The man walks to the drawers. He takes about 164,000 yen in cash and a check for a little over 17,000. He appears to take back his business card, and he leaves, leaving, by most accounts, something like 350,000 yen untouched in the branch. Think about that for a moment. He has just committed the most audacious mass killing in the country's post-war history. He has all the time in the world. The room is full of money, and he takes barely a third of it and walks away. What happens next is almost as damaging as the crime. The first police to arrive treat it as mass food poisoning. Officers and members of the public walk through the room trying to save people. The residual liquid, the single most important object in the entire case, the thing that would have answered every question that followed, is collected badly, and the evidence in it is destroyed. And the stolen check is only confirmed as stolen the day after somebody cashed it at a counter, which means the one moment the offender had to stand still and face a teller is gone before anyone thinks to watch for it. Within an hour, the case has already lost its best chance of being solved. The first real thread is that this was not his first attempt. It was his third. The previous October, at a bank in Ebata, a man had walked in with the same story: a card, a health official, a disease scare. The branch manager sent a clerk to check with the police box on the corner, and the man left. Nobody drank, nobody was hurt. In January, 1 week before the killing, he tried again at a branch in Nakai. Same pretext. This time, a manager visiting from another branch simply refused to drink, and again, the man withdrew without harming anyone. 2 rehearsals, 2 failures, and each time he left behind a business card. That is the strangest and most useful fact in the case. In Ebata, the card was real, printed for and handed out by a genuine public health official, a real doctor, a man who had nothing to do with the crime and whose name was being used without his knowledge. At Nakai, a week before the killing, the card named a health official who did not exist at all. So the investigation splits in 2. And to understand this case, you have to hold both halves in your head at once. One team works the cards, the other works the poison, and that means it works the army. And here is the part that surprises people who only know the headline version of this story. The military line was not a fringe theory listed by novelists later. It was the investigation. We know this with unusual precision because the section chief kept a diary, thousands of pages logged across 257 days, later analyzed page by page by a historian at Meiji University. Of more than 2,000 classified items in those field reports, the largest single category, by a wide margin, is former military personnel, around 35%. The most investigated targets are the secret warfare units, the biological unit on the continent, and the laboratories at Kawasaki. Those alone account for nearly half of the military reports. The reason is not mysterious. The real doctor whose card was used himself served in an Army epidemic prevention and water supply department. Pull that thread and you arrive, very quickly, at the men who had spent the war learning how to poison people one at a time. 5 days after the killing, the criminal affairs chief of the Metropolitan Police calls in an inspector and tells him something he is not supposed to know. He tells him that a wartime unit used living human beings for poison and germ experiments, that the Americans know, and the Americans are trading non-prosecution for the data, that the Soviets want those same men, and that if a former member of that unit turns out to be the killer, the consequences will be beyond the police. So the line is to be worked in total secrecy, 5 men, reporting to the chief personally and to nobody else. We know about that conversation because the inspector himself described it in print decades later. By that summer, his team had effectively mapped the Imperial Army's chemical, biological, and secret warfare apparatus and was closing on the specific units that had carried out individual poisonings. The diary records something else, too. People telling investigators in as many words that they had made a promise to the Americans and could not talk. And then, in the summer of 1948, the weight of the investigation shifts, away from the poison toward the cards.
Now we arrive at the hinge of the whole case. Everything turns here. What is certain is that the victims died of a cyanide compound. That has never been in dispute. What is in dispute is which one, and that question is not a technicality. It decides how many people on Earth could have done this. Start with what the survivors described, because the poison behaved oddly. Ordinary potassium cyanide, the compound of spy novels and suicide capsules, is fast, seconds. What happened in that branch took 2 to 5 minutes. People stayed on their feet, and the man drank a dose himself in front of 16 witnesses and then walked out of the building alive. There is a compound that fits that behavior better. It is slow. It was developed for secret warfare use, and an ordinary member of the public could not obtain it. In April of 1948, a former researcher from the Army's laboratory at Kawasaki told investigators exactly that. He did not believe the poison was potassium cyanide. The next day, the commander of the biological unit on the continent, a man the police interviewed 9 separate times during this case, offered his own opinion: potassium cyanide. In September, the same researcher who had doubted it in April attended an investigation meeting and signed a joint technical opinion. His conclusion had reversed. The substance, he now said, was low-purity industrial potassium cyanide, the commercial kind, available to anyone. He gave that same testimony in court the following year, and the courts adopted it. Hold the 2 versions side by side and look at what each one costs. If the poison was the military compound, the pool of possible offenders is a few hundred men, all of them recently demobilized from a program the Americans had just promised to protect. If the poison was industrial potassium cyanide, the pool of possible offenders is everyone in Japan, including a painter. That reversal happened in the months around the arrest. The sequence is documented and not in question. What it means is the argument that has run for 75 years, and it is worth being precise about what can and cannot be said. That the finding changed is fact. That it changed in order to fit a suspect is a theory, argued by serious researchers, never proven. Later work has kept the dispute open. University examinations have disagreed with each other, and analysis based at Keio has argued for the military compound, the one the painter could not have obtained. The residual liquid that would have settled it was destroyed in the first hour by police trying to save lives.
So how do you get from that room to a painter in Hokkaido? Through the cards. And the card work is genuinely extraordinary police work. The real health official whose name was used had printed 100 cards in that specific run. He kept 8. Of the remaining 92, the team physically recovered 62 and traced most of the rest in a country with no computers, working from the memory of a man who had exchanged cards with nearly 600 people. 8 cards could not be accounted for. One of those 8 had been given to a tempera painter of national standing, 56 years old, named Sadamichi Hirasawa. In August of 1948, he was arrested in Otaru in Hokkaido. He could not produce the card. He said it had been stolen with his wallet. His account of his movements that day was unclear. He had a prior fraud conviction involving a bank, and shortly after the killing, he had deposited a sum comparable to what was taken and would not or could not say where it came from. Then he confessed, roughly 62 sessions across 35 days. In December, in open court, he retracted all of it and said it had been produced by mental torture, and for the next 38 years, he never moved from that position. Now, let me put the case to you the way I think it actually stands, because the usual framing, was he guilty, yes or no, is the wrong question, and it is why this case never resolves. Line up what cuts against him. 1 of 8 untraceable cards, a prior bank fraud, unexplained money matching the loss, 3 levels of court affirming the verdict, some witnesses saying he resembled the man. That is not nothing. Any of us would want an answer about that money. Now, line up what cuts the other way. The confession came after 62 interrogations and was retracted at the first public opportunity. He had a diagnosed condition, memory disturbance, and confabulation following a rabies vaccination that his defense argued made him produce whatever story his questioners wanted. Identification by the survivors was equivocal. Not one of them picked him out unmistakably at the first confrontation. And in 8 months of the most intensive manhunt in post-war Japan, investigators never found a single route by which he could have obtained any cyanide compound. Not a supplier, not a purchase, nothing. That last one is what I keep returning to, because a conviction in this case requires an unbroken chain. This man, this poison, that room. The card work built one end of that chain with real rigor. The confession was offered as the other end. But the middle link, the poison itself, the only part of the crime that actually killed anyone, was never attached to him at all. It was attached to a category. Anyone could buy industrial potassium cyanide. He was a person, therefore he could have. And notice the order events happened in. The expert doubt about potassium cyanide came in April. The arrest came in August. The reversal to commercially available was signed in September. The investigation that had spent 35% of its effort on former secret warfare personnel turned toward the cards in the summer, Before, not after, the poison question was settled. I am not telling you that proves a cover-up. I want to be exact here because the record is exact. When the claim that the occupation authorities shut the military line down finally reached a courtroom, the Tokyo High Court ruled in 1981 that there is no evidence GHQ ordered that investigation stopped. That is the judicial finding, and anyone who tells you this story without it is selling you something. What the record does show is narrower, and in a way worse. A case where the physical evidence was destroyed by accident in the first hour, where the surviving evidence was an opinion, and where that opinion changed in the same season as the arrest, in the exact direction that made a conviction possible. The clean version, where the state framed an innocent artist to protect war criminals, is a story. The messy version is that a starving, occupied country needed this case closed, and closed it with the only material it had left, and that 32 years of justice ministers, one after another, picked up that file, looked at the same chain I have just described, saw the missing link, and put their pen down. He never left death row, and he was never executed. One justice minister signed warrants for 23 other condemned prisoners in a single year and would not sign this one, saying plainly that he doubted the man's guilt. Around 20 petitions for retrial were filed and rejected. In May of 1987, Sadamichi Hirasawa died of pneumonia in a medical prison at the age of 95 after 32 years under sentence of death, still insisting he was not the man with the armband. His adopted son spent his own life fighting for a posthumous retrial, recovering the paintings, filing the evidence. He was found dead alone in his flat in 2013, 54 years old, and the court closed the petition on the grounds that the petitioner no longer existed. Relatives filed the 20th in 2015. The branch was shut in 1950. The building is gone. The bank itself was absorbed and absorbed again until the name no longer exists on any street in Japan. 12 people took a cup because a man in an armband told them to, in a year when that was the reasonable thing to do. That is the part that never ages. The state was certain enough to sentence a man to death and never once certain enough to carry it out. For 32 years, the paperwork sat on desk after desk, and every hand that picked it up put it back down. What do you think the poison was?